Thank you to the OWASP conference for inviting us along for this talk, which is perhaps a little different to some of the other ones that you're going to on the agenda. My name is Bradley Anstis. I run technical strategy at AppSecEU. I'm joined by Vadim, who is one of our senior security researchers, and AppSecEU is a client-side security vendor with customers all around the world. So hands up who's come here to learn how to solve malware forever. So we never have to worry about it again. It's a big solution. It's all done. Okay. Who's in the wrong room? Okay. All right. Good. Well, 100% is a very large number. What can we detect 100% of at the moment? Spam? Well, no. 99.7% is not a bad spam rate, but it's not 100%. How about inappropriate images? We also deal with a lot with technologies around deep image analysis, looking at for basically pornographic images, so looking for curvature and skin tone and all that sort of exciting stuff. But that's definitely not exact technology. Phishing sites, how often do you see end users fall for the latest phishing sites, spear phishing sites? Social engineering, these guys are falling for this stuff all the time. And hey, if we could predict the future lotto numbers, I guess we wouldn't be here. So how do you maximize detection? How can we make sure that we're getting as close as possible to this magic 100%? Use as much information, as many tools, as many different guns and weapons as you can get in this battle. And this is basically what we're going to talk about today. So one of the big things that we wanted to try and get across today is the difference between reactive controls and proactive controls. Reactive controls are the historic sort of technologies that many of us are probably relying on today. Technologies like AV scanning, URL filtering, IP reputation. And then there's more proactive technologies like real-time code analysis and behavioral analysis, to name just a couple of technologies. But this is a really interesting area and a lot of innovation happening in the proactive side at the moment in client-side security. And I'll talk about application whitelisting because that's kind of a little bit different. So in terms of reactive controls, the big difference between them is reactive controls have to have seen the malware sample, the malware variant before to be able to detect it. It's basically a big list of signatures. The size of these databases is getting massive. If you look at Symantec, their signature databases have grown 672% between 2008 and 2010. So quite a massive growth in those sorts of lists. The vulnerability window is a big issue, and we're going to talk about that vulnerability window in a second. But they do have very low false positives, so it's a very accurate way of detecting malware. On the actual proactive side, they're a lot more focused on the actual methods or causes that the malware might use to actually infect the machine. So that list is actually a lot shorter than trying to recognize every single piece of malware. Much fewer updates are required because of that, but it can overblock, so it can detect legitimate activity and overblock that as malicious in some cases. So the current state of reactive controls, Vadim's team did some testing back in March. We had around 30,000 active live malicious URLs. Those are URLs that we've collected from our customers, from an environment we have called Secure Browsing, which is a free tool that you should check out on our website. But we collected these live malicious URLs, and then as they were actually live, because malicious websites or legitimate websites that are infected are normally only infected for a short period of time, but as they are actually infected, we tested them against URL filtering, testing against AV scanning. So in terms of URL filtering, around 42% were actually caught as malware, and in AV scanning, a combination of 3 leading AV scanners only detected 39% as actually malicious. Neither of those numbers are anywhere near 100. Even if you staggered them together, you're still not getting anywhere near 100. The other big number on the URL filtering, which is actually pretty concerning, is the 20% uncategorized. Talking to many customers, many organizations around the world, a lot of people with their uncategorized URL sites actually will let them go straight through because they're not really sure what the actual category is. So that could be another massive backdoor for a lot of organizations. So AV scanners. Been using them for a long time. They've been around since basically malware, I guess, has been around when it used to be distributed through SneakerNet, remember, on floppy disks and things like that. What happens with malware scanners is the vendor needs to actually research and discover that new variant of malware. Then they actually need to go and write their signature. They need to go through and develop the way they're actually going to remove that infection. Once the vendor actually does that, Then they add them to their master signature update database, and that update database then needs to get out to the customers, and then the customers need to get to their desktops. So that period can take quite a while. From go to woe, it can be hours, can be days, sometimes even weeks at a time. So it's this whole vulnerability window, because as soon as that malware is out, you might be one of the first people to get it. And if you've got it while you don't have your signature, then you're wide open for attack. The malware vendors are deploying more proactive controls and types of heuristics and things like that, but the detection levels are still well down where they should be. Helps if I press the right button. And we can see the vulnerability window issue here. So if you look at, say, Symantec, 24% average detection rate upon the initial test, and then 7 days later rises to 44.1%. So they've had that time to go through and find these new malware variants and get them into their databases. So I guess if we could just hold every single executable that we've got coming into our machines for 7 days, our AV scanning might be a lot more successful. But that might be a little bit unusable. So some pros and cons of reactive controls. In terms of AV scanning, very fast scanning. Basically, there's nothing much faster than actually scanning with an exact hash signature for the actual malware you're trying to find. Very low false positives, a very accurate technology. And as I said, the vendors are starting to supplement the reactive controls with some heuristics and some more proactive type controls, but still very early days there. But if you're looking for AV vendors, definitely ask them these questions to find out how well they're doing with these newer proactive controls. The other good thing about AV scanners is they're deployable at the desktop, the gateway, and also in the cloud. So if you're layering different vendors at each one of these points, then that's a great best practice to try and maximize your coverage, because you're betting vendors against each other, and you will increase your overall coverage in doing that. The disadvantages of AV scanning: the vendor lab has to see the sample before they can protect you, and the signature needs to get all the way down to your desktops. Easily fooled by polymorphic and dynamically created malware. So polymorphic viruses are basically viruses that rebuild themselves every 20 minutes or so, and they do that to break the signatures. So the AV scanning technology relies on a signature to recognize a piece of malware. The malware sits there and just rebuilds itself every 20 minutes to change that hash. Then the AV scanner needs to start all over again trying to recognize that piece of malware. So that's polymorphic viruses. And then even more popular today are dynamically created malware. So when a browser is actually hitting an infected website, each time that browser hits the website, they get a completely different piece of malware that's dynamically created as they actually hit the site. Very hard for AV scanners to keep up with that. And the signature databases themselves getting very large and difficult to maintain. I mean, what do you actually take out of the database? It's a very difficult decision. URL filtering advantages. URL filtering, very fast determination. So again, very fast technology, which is a very good thing when you're trying to protect against the web channel, where users are going to notice latency very quickly. URL filtering was actually first invented not as a security control, but as a productivity control. So back when the internet first came out, remember, it was very much the static web, where we basically downloaded information from websites. We didn't really upload much information like we do now. So URL filtering is really designed to make sure that users stay on purpose. They stay doing their work. They don't go off browsing inappropriate sites or job-wasting sites or something like that. They're making sure they're staying on their work sites. Typically deployed at the gateway, but also very flexible, deployed in lots of UTM type devices and things like that. URL filtering, you see a lot of it in the market. Some disadvantages of URL filtering. URL filtering again is like an exact match. You basically allow a site or you block a site. You can't really do anything more than that. So one example might be, think about some of the newer, more dynamic sites like Wikipedia. So if you look at when you're doing URL categorization, and we have a URL categorization database that we use in K-12 in the US, in the school, so young school kids. So we need to be very conservative the way we actually categorize sites. So Wikipedia for us is actually in porn, which may sound bizarre to you, but there are definitely pornographic pages on Wikipedia, so we have to classify it as porn. But the problem with URL filtering is it doesn't allow us that granular control. I mean, what are we going to do? Classify every single page on Wikipedia? That's where we need to start looking at more proactive controls. An example there would actually be dynamic categorization when you're visiting the page, which is an emerging technology. It's impossible to cover every single site on the internet. Kind of a big place. That's kind of like the no-brainer point on this slide. Difficult to keep up legitimate websites when they're being infected, especially if they're only infected for hours or days at a time. How often is the actual URL categorization coming back and rescanning that site to find out if it's infected or if it's changed its category or what actually might be happening? So URL filtering certainly has its limitations as well. IP reputation, another technology. So before the hackers started infecting legitimate websites, they just brought up their own websites to actually use as their attack targets. So when they're bringing up their own websites, those websites might only be up for a short period of time. They might only be up for days or hours, probably using some sort of dodgy domain registrar. All those sorts of factors are quite easy to actually detect in terms of reputation. So here I can actually see, in terms of reputation, if this site's only been up for a day and it's got this strange registrar that's got a bad reputation for registering other dodgy sites, then I'm thinking I probably don't want to be going to this website. So that's what IP reputation is all about. So it looks at many factors, many more factors apart from categorization, and very fast determination. However, it does have a high false positive rate, and typically today, of all the infected websites, around 84% of those are actually legitimate websites. So IP reputation is really starting to get less effective in terms of a security control. So you can see all these different controls individually aren't really stacking up. So proactive controls. So here's the big difference. So proactive controls are detecting malware and malicious code that we don't have to have seen before. There's one example of proactive controls. This screen's really high. Real-time code analysis. So how real-time code analysis works is I'm visiting a web page. My web page comes in there. We've got a true content detection engine that sits there and works out what all the different pieces are that's made up that web page. Is there JavaScript? Is there ActiveX controls? Whatever. Splits all that out, works out the build of the actual page itself, breaks that all down into the separate pieces, and then goes through and scans each one of those. So like, for example, you have a JavaScript engine that will sit there and go through any JavaScript looking for known methods or code that has been well used in attacks before, and then working out the malicious intent of that. And then we get all those results, put them all together, and then come up with our behavioral profile. And then based on the actual policy, will depend on whether you're allowed to visit that website or you block that website. I should actually add one innovation we're seeing at the moment from the bad guys is instead of just having their attack code in a JavaScript or in a some active like Flash script or something like that, they're starting to split it between the two. So they might have some pieces in the JavaScript and other pieces in the Flash code, and actually instead of splitting them apart, we're going to have to start running those together now to see the actual full profile. So just a demonstration of the ebbs and flows that we deal with. Keeps the team in a job. Another type of proactive control is behavioral analysis. This one and the graphic on the other side of the screen there you can see changing is actually a screen video of a service we have called the Blended Threats module. And what this basically does is it looks at incoming email, looks at your embedded URLs, takes those out and sticks it into this cloud-based service, runs those URLs to work out the malicious intent of those URLs, and then we give the email the thumbs up or the thumbs down, depending on whether we're going to allow it through or not. So it works by monitoring the file or URL in that testing environment. Typically, you need to fully execute the sample. So if it's a URL, then we basically drop it into a browser and wait for the browser to stop doing stuff so we know it's fully loaded. It does support all types of files. So for example, if you were worried about infections inside Word or JPEGs or, unbelievably, I know PDF files might be infected, then you could actually load those tools on your testing environment and look for the malicious intent of all those file types as well. So it's very flexible there. Basically works by dropping into that testing environment, stepping back and working out where the smoke's coming from in terms of what's happening in the OS. It's kind of like FileMon and RegMon running in the middle there, and also hooking all the network calls, looking for outgoing command control traffic, SMTP traffic, etc. So great ability to recognize an application is trying to also detect if it's running in a virtual environment. Because most of the malware researchers use virtualization a lot, we don't have a whole bunch of money, so we do have to use virtualization to try and get as many environments as possible. We do see malware looking to see if it's running in a virtual environment, and if it is, then it goes to sleep. But